So basically the topic that I was looking at and talking with Patrick Ford when we were coming up with the general topic for this was obviously something related with sport and virtue, because that seems to be the focus of Belmont Abbey athletics in a large part, and obviously one of the big reasons why I enjoy being here as a coach. So the specific topic that we came up with was integrating virtue development and performance training. Does it really work? I can tell you, I'm going to give you a spoiler, I'm not going to be able to tell you if it really works, and I'll explain that at the end, but hopefully you guys will be able to see kind of what our process is and some of the different things that we do to try to integrate performance training and virtue development along the same pathway instead of separate pathways. So to begin with, what I'd like to do is try to give you, definitions of a couple of terms. I think that would be helpful and hopefully set the stage for where we're going to go with this. But basically, the first two things I want to define, obviously with the title of the talk, are virtue development and performance training. So virtue development, we look at it as obviously part of the mission of who we are as Belmont Abbey College, as part of the mission of a Catholic education. But a very simple definition would be growing in a set of habitual actions to do the good. So basically developing good habits towards, what is right. And then on the performance training side of things, obviously they're looked at a little bit differently in most cases, but the definition that I have for performance training is striving to reach the highest level of performance that one is capable of in a certain discipline. So it doesn't necessarily mean just in athletics, but within a certain discipline, trying to be the very best that you're capable of becoming. A lot of times I think when I think about coaches, the first thing that comes to mind is winning, because that's what you think about in sport. There's obviously usually going to be a winner and a loser every time you enter into a competition. And so I want to discuss this a little bit too, and hopefully explore the difference between what performance training is and the traditional view of what you might think an athletic coach does. So I think the traditional view of athletic coaching is you're setting out with both the point and the purpose of what you're doing to be winning, and then coaching a team athletically to accomplish the ultimate goal, which is winning games, winning matches, sets, depending upon, what sport that you are in. Performance training, the way that I look at it, is a little bit different than that traditional view of athletic coaching. Basically with performance training, what we do is we separate the point and the purpose of what the athletic competition training, that whole experience is all about. So in terms of the purpose, instead of looking at the purpose as winning, we look at the purpose as to maximize each player's potential within your sphere of influence as a coach. Now, winning is still the point because it's around what the competition and training are oriented. But instead of just the purpose being also winning, now the purpose becomes reaching your potential, which at the end of the day I think is consistent with the idea of, we see up all around campus, the excellence and virtue banners, which I think are more or less the same idea, just talked about from the language of performance training, as opposed to just the idea of excellence. So I just want to make that connection at the beginning, is the ideal of excellence and the idea of performance training are very similar and have a lot of carryover, which is exactly what we're going to talk about here. For the players that we coach, and this is a little bit of a digression here, but we're going to come back to this at the end because I think this is one of the most important things in the conclusion. But for the athletes here, and obviously, from my perspective, they're athletes. From other perspectives, they may be students first. From other perspectives, they may have different roles. But that's exactly what we want to find out. So what are their roles? And obviously, with the body, mind, and spirit for each person, we try to look at the different roles that they have during their 4 years here. So academically, athletically, and then in terms of spiritual life and character development. So more or less the formation of the whole human person. And I want to keep that in mind as we go through the rest of what our performance development plans look like. So as a performance coach, differentiating from your view of maybe a traditional coach focused just on winning, you can look at excellent performance as the ideal to be worked for, and that winning or losing is not necessarily consequential to whether or not you achieve that. So, for example, does everyone in here know who Roger Federer is from a tennis perspective? At least vaguely. So, if you, as a tennis player, this is an example I use with my players on a fairly consistent basis, but you could be playing to very, very close to what your actual potential is, play Roger Federer and never win a game. You could be playing a third grader be playing very close to the lowest end of your potential and never surrender a game. So in one case, you're getting very close to maximizing your potential. In the other case, you're the exact opposite. And in no way, shape, or form maximizing your potential. Yet the one where you don't maximize your potential, you're winning. And the one where you do maximize your potential, you're losing. And so that kind of shows that there's not necessarily this absolute link between playing at your highest level and winning matches or winning games or whatever it might be. So there is a separation between those two things, and just I want to get the point across that winning is not the same as playing your best, because there are a lot of other factors that go into that. So, with this in mind as a coach, rather than focusing on just winning games or winning matches, the focus should then switch to how can every athlete maximize every bit of their potential within the program that you run. And if you look at part of their role in college or part of their particular vocation is to be a participant in college athletics, then what we should try to do as coaches is to strive to integrate body, mind, and spirit into the experience of every athlete that we work with in order to help them maximize their talent. And along with that, if athletic talent is given by God, then we have a responsibility to make the most of that talent. Obviously, most of you are familiar with the parable of the talents in Scripture. And in the same way, if someone was given great intellectual gifts, they would have a responsibility to make the most of those gifts and talents too. So, just kind of identifying the athletic talent is one of the different gifts that people can be given. And if it's a part of what their role is supposed to be within the college formation education environment, especially here, then it's something to take seriously and really look at as a part of their life. So that's kind of the background information, hopefully some of the perspective of what we specifically try to accomplish as our program and how we try to integrate performance training into what we do as opposed to coaching wins and losses, which I think there's a huge difference. So, question is, within our program, how do we integrate the ideal of excellence or the idea of athletics as a part of vocation into what we do? Okay. So basically there's 4 things that we try to do, and obviously I can go into a little bit more detail if anyone has any questions, and I'm sure you will if you think about some of these things in great detail. But first and foremost, obviously, integrating this performance training is during the recruiting process. So obviously we want to recruit athletes that are open to this, as opposed to players that are solely focused on, I came here to win. You want players that are focused on, I came here to be the best version of myself, and ultimately that's the fundamental goal. Now, not every person that we recruit is going to fully understand that, but we try to identify who's going to be open to that and who has potential to really integrate that into what they think about during competition. So we try to make it very clear that we believe athletics is a gift, and that if you come into our program, we'll do everything within our power to help you be the very best that you can be, maximize your potential both on and off the court. So we have some specific roles that we think about in terms of the tennis player. And so tennis specifically, we look at the roles as an athlete, as a competitor, and as a tennis player. So the tennis player is probably what you think about most, and you might be able to apply to any sport, soccer player, basketball player, football player, how well they've mastered the skills and developed the muscle memory and things like that in order to get to the point where they want to be successful. But there's also the athlete and the competitor. The athlete has to do with a lot with the physical preparation and training, and the competitor has to do with what's in here, what's your motivation for playing, and what's your purpose, most importantly, at the end of the day. Outside of tennis, we try to emphasize to them that we want to help you reach your potential in the other areas too. So as a man or a woman of great character, as a student of excellence and integrity, and ultimately as a person motivated to reach every bit of their potential in life. And this matches up with those roles I talked about earlier, with the body, mind, spirit, and the roles of a college student who's also an athlete with academically, athletically, and their spiritual life. So that's the first thing, is just trying to identify that in the recruiting process and find players who are open to that. The second thing is performance goals. So basically this is going to be about focusing on process versus just on outcomes. So during the training and competition process, we focus not necessarily on win and loss goals, but on tangible performance goals. And It is somewhat subjective because it's up to us as a coaching staff to figure out what we're capable of achieving and try to figure out what the potential is for that, which we don't always get right. But obviously we do our best effort to get there. And then along with that, how are we moving along the path of progress to make each player the best they can be relative to what their potential is? And obviously you have, as I said before, the athlete, the competitor, the tennis player, and the spiritual and character development. So we focus entirely on performance-based coaching and development-based coaching, not outcome-based coaching. So if you listen to a lot of the things that we talk about in our post-games or pre-games, even when we're doing our team meetings during practice time, it's very, very rarely anything to do with the outcome. It's very little to do with, did you win that set? Did you win that tiebreaker? Did you win that match? Did you lose that match? But it's about how did you do what you did? You know, what is the way in which you performed? What is the effort that you put forward? And are you on track to continue progressing towards developing towards your full potential within those roles that we've already discussed? So, you know, obviously with this type of mentality is the idea that outcomes are a side effect of quality performances and quality efforts. So that's the wins and the losses, the outcomes. And so we try to look at quality performance and quality effort first. And I'm not going to go into all the ways that we try to quantify that, but we do a lot of statistics, based analysis, and, you know, track different things over time. So we can get a good idea of where people are based on their, you know, performance continuum and what the level that they're trying to achieve over the course of your 4 years. And in question answer, if you would like more examples of that, happy to give them, but for this, I'm just going to keep it at that. We've got recruiting as number 1, 2 is performance-based goals and coaching. Number 3 is relating performance to more than just athletics. And I think this is one of the challenges that, you know, is if you recruit the wrong kind of students who are only interested in the athletic side of things, you will find it difficult to, you know, have them believe that there's more to life than just winning or losing the game. So when we're coaching performance, instead of just the sport, it's easier to make the link between academics, athletics, character development, and the spiritual of life. You know, the gap between being a great athlete, a great student, and someone with a great spiritual life can be minimal if each person is striving to reach their highest level of performance in every single thing that they do. So the exact same process that goes into maximizing your performance as an athlete or trying to, you know, make the most of the skills, talents, and gifts that God has given you is, you know, the exact same process that you can apply to maximizing performance as a student, or in the same vein can also be applied to maximizing your personal relationship with God and your spiritual life. So the idea of perfect performance or the ideal of excellence becomes the way of life in all that you do, rather than focusing on winning tennis matches, on getting A's in your classes, or going to daily mass. And all of those things are objectively good things, but the focus shouldn't be on just what the outcome of those things are, but instead the focus of how am I working towards being my very best and putting forth, you know, that best effort of development in all these different areas, and then applying that to everything that you do instead of having to segment it. So, fourth, and this is the final thing, so integration. So on top of making the focus of what we talk about, the way we coach, the way we prepare on performance first, how do we put a practical plan in place where each person within our formative reach can have an opportunity to live out the ideal of excellence? And obviously this is the challenge. All this stuff is good in concept. How can you actually make it happen? So while we're not perfect at it by any means, we're trying some different things, and here are some of the things that we found to be pretty successful thus far. Each Wednesday we meet as a women's team and then as a men's team, and we focus on a certain virtue each week that we want to integrate into basically our lives across all the areas and all the roles. And then we give some practical application of what we can do in order to integrate those key virtues into our daily life. So there's 2 different things that we do. The first thing is weekly goals, and the players come up with them themselves. They have a certain criteria that they go through, and it's basically SMART goals, so specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. And we work with them at the beginning of the year to help them set those and make sure they have the criteria set properly. And As the year goes on, then we have a little bit less involvement in setting those goals, and they do them for themselves. So they'll set a personal goal or a spiritual goal, an academic goal, and an athletic goal each week. And then every Wednesday night, they'll get, on a note card, they'll get handed back that and see whether or not that's something that they accomplished over the course of the last 7 days. So that's number one, is just trying to help them realize what their roles are within the, being a college student athlete at a Catholic university like Belmont Abbey. And also, be having some self-accountability as to, did I accomplish this, and to what extent am I going to be able to continue to grow and develop in these areas. The other thing that we do is specific virtue goals, and we give them reminders halfway through the week about them. But what I figured we could do is, instead of explaining it, I thought it would be easier to have everyone do an example of it. So what I'm going to do is I have some paper here. You guys can cut it in half. You might have to share pens. But basically what this is going to be a specific example of how you can integrate a certain virtue into your daily activity over the course of the short term, so 7-day period. One of the ones that we recently went over, and these always are accompanied by some sort of presentation, and it might be like a motivational speaker video, it might be clips from a movie, it might be just a team discussion, small group discussion. We tailor it really based on what we think will be most effective in these specific instances. But the one that we're going to do first and foremost is selflessness, because that's obviously something that we're trying to develop in each of the players within our program. And so everybody can write down if you have a pen yet. Do you guys need more pens? I think I have a couple more in here. They're coming around. So with selflessness, and you guys obviously aren't getting the benefit of having a 20 to 25 minute presentation prior to it about selflessness, but just seeing what the goal setting aspect is. So what are 3 things that you can do to integrate selflessness into your life over the 7-day period, and then check if you accomplish them? So the first thing that we had them do was come up with something you like to complain about and write it down. So something that consistently bothers you and that you find yourself thinking about or talking about a lot. And we typically don't read the cards, so if they say the coaches, we'll never know. So when you have that complaint, over the next week, every time that complaint comes into your mind, instead of thinking about it, dwelling on it, or talking about it, look at the situation around you, try to find someone who may, probably has nothing to do with that complaint. But instead of focusing on yourself first, turn outward and focus on someone else and make an effort to assist someone else or ask someone else how their day is going, or anything of that nature. So just taking that opportunity that you have to complain and turning it towards providing a outlet and connection with someone else in a positive manner. So that's number one. The second and third ones are a little bit easier. I think the second one is a little act of menial service, and this is not one that you will probably know at the present moment, but it could be something as simple as someone left their tray in the cafeteria, you picking up their tray, putting it back over where the dishes are washed, and not expecting any sort of gratitude or kudos or high five for it. So doing something just for the purpose of putting another menial activity above what you want to do or what you think is your role. And the third thing that we had them do is we had them partner up and literally pick names out of a hat and have a big act of service for a teammate. So this could be something where you sacrifice your time, you sacrifice your money, or one of your skills in order to help someone else or provide something for someone that they'll greatly appreciate. So we had all we did was he wrote down the name of somebody. So, for you guys, what you could do is for the monks, write down a fellow monk. For coaches, write down another coach. Students, write down another student. Staff or faculty, write down another staff or faculty member. But just think of something that you can do for someone over the course of this next week that would really be putting them above yourself. And we had a couple of examples that the players on the team shared. One of them was driving a player to Moe's to get dinner because he really wanted to go off campus. And again, that doesn't seem like the biggest thing in the world, but I think for a moment, it forces the 18 to 22-year-olds who are here to think about someone else first instead of just self first. And obviously, I can give you lots of other examples too. And then we've done other virtue goals like this, but I think selflessness was one of the ones that was very impactful and effective. And so hopefully this just gives you a good idea of what that looks like. So back to the final question: does this really work? It's hard to perfectly quantify the intangible qualities that a person possesses, and obviously the only person who can know perfectly and know it all what someone's heart and soul is like and what someone's true intentions are is God. So at the end of the day, and we've done different things. We've done surveys where we try to figure out what their thoughts are on certain issues, what their thoughts are on virtues. We try to, obviously with these cards, implement virtuous action over the course of 7-day periods over and over and over again, and have a lot of different things that we can do to try to make tangible or to measure what those intangible qualities are. But we're always going to be stuck measuring some sort of mechanism as opposed to what the true intention of that is. So I guess the question, does it work, might be a question better left for Judgment Day of what's the intention? Because at the end of the day, I have a very hard time identifying what a perfect way to measure that would be. And that's obviously one of the challenges is you put forth, in our case, we're trying to put forth a program that develops these virtues and really focuses on integrating all these different aspects into the performance side as opposed to just focusing on hitting tennis balls. But it's very hard to know exactly what the effect of that will be. And if anyone has any ideas, I'm more than open to hearing that. I want to finish with a quote from Pope John Paul II, and this is probably my favorite John Paul II quote on athletics, but this is how it goes. So sport, as you well know, is an activity that involves more than the movement of the body. It demands use of intelligence and the disciplining of the will. It reveals, in other words, the wonderful structure of the human person created by God as a spiritual being, a unity of body and spirit. Athletic activity can help every man and woman to recall that moment when God the Creator gave origin to the human person, the masterpiece of his creative work. So, that's it.
Okay, now we'll have time for some questions if you want to ask Coach about the next 10 issues.
Yes.
Mike, you were talking about the weekly goals and that they have a personal, spiritual, academic, athletic weekly goal. Do they self-assess their accomplishment of that, or is that something that
They self-assess.
Okay. And then do they give that feedback to you, or how do you kind of check in just to see how they're doing?
We keep that feedback, and one of the things that we'll do at the end of each semester is we'll go through each week, and we'll see what the percentage of the goals that were set were accomplished over the course of the semester on a weekly basis.
Have you done any looking back and said, wow, interesting, there's a correlation or whatever between the people who are accomplishing the personal goals and then the outcome goals, whether they're winning matches or they're closer to winning matches or that kind of stuff?
Well, we've only been doing this for a year, so I don't have an extensive data set. I can tell you that the people who are consistently accomplishing the 3 goals, just from looking through it on a very basic level, seem to consistently perform at a high level. But I wouldn't say that I have enough data to make a final conclusion on that one way or another. Statistically, it's just not enough to be significant.
What about just the engagement? Do you find that the higher performing outcome goal or
Yes, I would say that the highest performing outcome, like quote unquote outcome performers, are the ones that are focused the least on the outcome and the most on this process of peak performance. Absolutely, no question. I can give you a dozen examples. I'm not going to drop names, but I can think of about a dozen over the last 3 years. Yes.
So to what extent is you're talking about spiritual goals, and for those students you have that don't necessarily recognize, maybe you don't have a faith, you don't have a Catholic faith, to what extent is it explicit that developing in virtue is becoming more Christ-like, or is that something that it's hard to be explicit about?
That's something that we don't try to make that connection at the beginning. I think that's, if you're going to make that connection, then that's obviously a big benefit of it, but not everyone's at the same place, within the program, and obviously within their spiritual life in the program as well. And I think there's, some benefit to not trying to be the Holy Spirit in that regard, is maybe it's not my job to always make that connection of that doing that is specifically Christ-like, and instead focusing on virtue development and spiritual development, even if it's from a quote-unquote more secular perspective, is still an objectively good thing that's putting you in a position to have those encounters and those experiences. So it's less focus on talking about a personal relationship with Christ, more emphasis on how can you, again, the idea of performance training. How can you be the very best that you're capable of becoming? Obviously, at one point, we want them to make the connection of, if there's a spiritual life, well, maybe that's pretty important in the grand scheme of things. And we do discuss that, but we try to stay away from specifically giving them this is what it is, and let them try to reach those conclusions on their own, because obviously a conclusion you reach on your own with the right formation is very powerful, as opposed maybe to something you just read if you're not open to it. So that's kind of what the idea is behind that. Yes?
Thank you for your talk this morning. It sounds like the tennis program is doing quite well. One of the things that I notice about virtue and my experience with your players is, to me, they seem like people who are filled with joy. And that, to me, seems a natural consequence of virtue, a virtuous life. Since you've implemented this program, have you noticed an affective change in your players, just in their joy and peace and happiness?
I'd say there's two ways in particular that's been effective. And I think the first one is most athletes coming out of high school are very, very concerned, and it may be the same way in a lot of sports, but I think tennis in particular, they're very concerned about ranking points. They're very concerned about where they are on a ladder, and they're very, very concerned about what their win and loss record is. And I know that's important for team sports as well, but at the individual sport level, it can become all-consuming, because that's the only thing you're thinking about. Am I going to go to college? Am I going to get recruited? Am I going to have an opportunity to continue, competing at the next level? And I think what this does is take some of that away and allow them to be a little bit more free and, I guess the word is joyful with what they're doing. Now, obviously, they don't do it all perfectly all the time by any means. I can assure you of that. But I think it has had a real impact on a lot of our players, and the ones that quote unquote get it, I think would be able to, actually trace this out for you of what the thought process is and what some of the benefits of it are. I think the second thing, in addition to that, is just the idea of being thankful for what you have. Obviously, the gratitude bell is right over there, a very good indication of that as well. And unknowingly, we kind of coordinated our selflessness and gratitude sessions with the unveiling of the gratitude bell. And I think that's been something that has been a real positive for our athletes, as well as recognizing that they have a great opportunity, and if they have gifts and talents, then this is an opportunity to do something special within them, within the context of a program and within the context of their role within the program. So I think that's very kind of freeing and helpful as well.
For students who have 4 years, and when they see 4 years times X number of Wednesdays, would they see repeat virtues, or would they see several virtues across 4 years? presented to them?
We have two that we really try to focus on, and they're kind of, might seem polar opposites, but love and toughness. And I think, or resilience, if you want to look at it that way, like love and resilience. I think that we've never repeated the same thing twice. We have, and it kind of depends on what's going on within the program, within the team, within the context of their performances. But there's so many different perspectives on looking at those two things. If you look at all the books that have been written from both a theological and a secular perspective on love, I mean, you could discuss that for the next 1,000 years and never run out of content. And, two aspects of that we're looking at right now are selflessness and gratitude. Selflessness is putting others in front of yourself. Gratitude is being thankful for the opportunities that you have to do what you love. So there may be some overlap, but we try to make sure we've never recycled anything. It's always put in, on a weekly basis, and it's not written out 6 months in advance. It's done based on the time, based on what the current state of things, within the programs is.
Let me know when you present some chastity, see how you do that one.
I will. I'm sure I'll be back here for that. Yes, Kevin?
I have two questions.
Yes.
I think one kind of comes from my experience as an athlete. So talking so much about progress, you find yourself having to, and this integrative progress in just every aspect of your life. Do you find yourself having to cast vision for progress so that students aren't frustrated when they realize that it's not linear, that it's not like you're not progressing at a constant rate, and can deal with setbacks as part of progressing?
I think that goes back to the roles that we have. So you have the competitor, the athlete, and the tennis player within the athletic side of things. And I think if I talk about that, it might answer some of the other aspects. But in terms of, most people think about progress, they think about as a soccer player, am I striking the ball well? Am I making the right decision on the field? Am I keeping my head up, passing to the right spot? And in tennis, most players think about how well they're hitting the strokes, and then they think about whether or not they're winning or losing the matches. And that's why we also look at the athlete and competitor within those roles, because even if growth slows in a particular role, that might provide you an opportunity to really grow in another role. So, for example, if you're stagnant growth in terms of you're developing your strokes, you're working on your serve, but you can't seem to get over a hump, then it becomes a question of, well, how do I improve and continue to progress in my role as a competitor, of finding a way to push to that, finding creative solutions where I can still continue to progress in all these aspects. And maybe I can't progress anymore with my serve, but how do I use that most effectively in competitive situations, make the best decisions? And ultimately, that's opening a new door to continue that progress and development. So.
And there's the second question. What was your experience as were you a performance-based athlete, or did you have this kind of movement from outcome-oriented to performance?
I think from my own personal experience, I had a very outcome-based idea. I have a very sports-oriented family. My mother was an Olympic athlete. My dad played 3 sports in college, and 4 of the 5 brothers played Division I tennis. And so everyone within my family environment and my background was always focused on winning. And it wasn't this overt, if you win, you're the worst. But it was just consistently what everyone did. And it psyched me out when I was in high school and in college. I was really, really hard. And so I was kind of faced with the situation of, do I quit because I can't handle this? Or is there another way to look at athletics that's not just about winning and losing? Because I had family members that were much more talented than I was, and so it was difficult results-wise when my results didn't match up with their results. Well, why aren't you winning? Maybe we don't have the same talent. Maybe I'm not as good. I don't know. But that was kind of what got me thinking about this years and years ago.
Mike, do you do the same weekly process in your championship segment as you do in your non-championship segment?
Mm-hmm. Yep. We'll do a mix of things. Up until this week, it's been specifically virtue development over the course of the semester. Going forward, we're doing 3 Wednesday team activities. So you're doing a mini golf tournament, a team movie, and going to a basketball game. So it's not, we try to mix in some different things within the Wednesday night context and not have it just be classroom virtue development, because there's obviously, a good mix of things that can, be effective. And we're trying to add a little bit more in our non-championship segment, a little bit more service activity in there as well, because obviously that's a big part of selflessness and helpful. But this is the first year that we've been, kind of integrating all three of those things within the team meeting context. Thank you, guys.